Are all the mics working?
You hear me?
Yes. Good.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Wonderful. It was eerily quiet. I was worried.
Don't worry, that won't last long.
Right.
Especially starting around 9 o'clock this evening on TV.
Yeah, right.
Very noisy.
Tell me, I'm doing a poll. What is more boring, the State of the Union address or the Oscars?
Or the what?
Or the Oscars?
Oh, the Oscars. Good
Oscars
question.
were pretty interesting last year, but not for reasons they were happy about, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
That was bad.
All right, let's see. Jim Walton, I think we're missing, and that's it. Let's see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to keep us moving all night because we got a lot to get through. So why don't we just start? We've got the school coming in 15 minutes. So let's start with the January 10th. I think those are the only meeting minutes that we need to review. Is that right, Susie?
I think Susie's muted, I think.
I'll have to check that.
Okay.
But we can go for the 10th for now.
All right. I think there was a typo in 3B, sorry, 3C. Just the word numbers was misspelled. I didn't see anything else. Anybody have Jim Hemingway?
Yes, Susie, I sent you an email. Did you get that email about the changes I wish to make about 5C, which is the little piece you put in about the broadband?
No,
I
I
just-
didn't get that.
Yeah, it just reads, after many prior notices, the Shutesbury MLP and Sheld have warned those Shutesbury broadband subscribers who've not set up. And I just went into a little bit more detail and clarification. And if you could just copy and paste that in, that would be great, rather than tie up time here trying to explain what I had
All right.
written.
All right.
But it was specifically about individuals who did not set up accounts, not losing access.
Yeah, that's right. The folks who didn't set up an account or, since September 1st of last year. And I just added a little bit more detail because it's, I didn't want it to be misunderstood.
I can see it in my mail. It says, after many prior notices, the MLP and Shell have warned those Shutesbury broadband subscribers who have not set up an account with Shell, our ISP internet service provider, or paid their bills since September 1, 2022, will have their broadband service terminated on January 15th, 2023. So if that's what people are okay with, we'll just call that as amended.
I'm okay with it.
Great. Anybody else have any comments on the January 10th minutes? All right,
No.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second,
Okay.
Evernight, aye.
Right here, I.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, I.
Okay. So those minutes are approved. While we're waiting for the school, why don't we just get a couple of little announcement kinds of things out of the way? So I I wanted to mention that the Michael DiChiara of the Energy and Climate Action Committee reached out to me a couple days ago, asking if he could meet with, or if that committee could meet with the FinCom to have kind of a future-oriented discussion about the sort of financial implications of, I guess, various climate change sort of preparedness issues that have kind of that are I think outlined in the vulnerability study that the town has been involved in.
MVP.
Yeah, and so I'm going to forward everyone. I didn't want to forward it before I had a chance to mention it to you all, just because you might be confused about it. But so I'm going to forward his message. It has some additional documents just for sort of background context. And when we get to the end of our meeting tonight and we talk about sort of agenda for the next meeting, let's see what it looks like and if we can squeeze them in then. If not, we should figure out a specific date we can accommodate them, because I want to get back to him on that. Jim Hemingway?
Does this requested meeting have to take place before annual town meeting? We've got a lot on our plate. I was just wondering if it's sort of a conceptual discussion, maybe it could wait until after May 1st, perhaps. I don't know. What
Possibly.
do you think?
Let's see what our schedule looks like. Just and we can I think we can have a brief discussion at the end of tonight to see if it's if we can accommodate them. I will say it doesn't sound to me like there's any particular action they do want us to take in the near future. So if we couldn't accommodate them, I guess I don't think it'd be that. Didn't sound to me like it'd be a big problem to wait until after. But let's see. So Susie,
I did find that January 4th meeting, we didn't approve those minutes, so if we do have time.
Okay. All right. Was that the special? No, was that the meeting we did with?
Yeah, that was at 12. It was on at 12 o'clock. Was that on a Wednesday or a Tuesday?
I think it was a Wednesday.
Yeah, I put that wrong on, I think. Now I don't have a January calendar to look at. Anyways, but yeah, those haven't been approved. It was just going over the agenda for the approving the warrants for the
All right.
special town meeting. But
Okay. So everybody on January 14th will be the email date that Susie forwarded those minutes. So if you want to take a quick peek at them.
it's the date, it wasn't Tuesday.
January 4th was a Wednesday.
Yeah, I fixed it on my minutes.
Okay, good. Yep.
All right. So this is when we discuss the
I
warrant.
had no changes to it.
I just made George a co-host. Is there anyone who might be presenting any materials tonight who wants to be a co-host?
I could be if it,
Okay.
yeah.
It's possible that I might want to show a document too, Becky.
Okay. I just read through these minutes. I don't have any comments. Does anybody else have any comments on the January 4th minutes?
Fine.
I make a motion, we approve them.
I'll second it. Arvanitis, aye.
Here I.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Moser, I. Melody, you weren't at that meeting, so we'll call that an abstain.
All right.
Walt,
Jimmy,
you're
voting?
you're
You're on
muted.
mute.
Walt and I.
Okay,
Thank you, Bob.
great. All right. All right. Any other like kind of quick announcement things? Dan, good to see you. Is anybody else coming from the school side tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So does anybody, while we're waiting on them, does anybody have any announcements or any kind of quick little updates they want to share at this point, just to save us some time later on in the meeting? All right, I think maybe I'll just mention just a capital planning update. I don't think we discussed this at our last meeting, but capital planning met, I don't have the date in front of me, but we discussed 3 requests that the school has made. So it might be worth me mentioning this just because it may, I don't know, since we have school people attending tonight. I think everybody knows, I think we mentioned this, that the phone communication system is has been in really terrible shape, and it's been creating all sorts of problems. I think I was really struck that I think I heard that it wasn't like people weren't able to leave voicemail messages, which seemed pretty shocking to me. But anyway, so the wonderful Debbie Lee, I think folks may know, is like one of the technology teachers at the school, has kind of led a project to evaluate some options, and they are recommending one of those options, which is to which is going to be to utilize Crocker. That has a capital cost of just under $5,000 and a monthly charge of $376, and it's a 3-year term on that. So I'll just mention that briefly. And then they also had 2 requests they submitted, one for kitchen flooring replacement, which is about $16,500, and then library carpeting, which is just under $20,000. But anyway, we can share more details later, but just thought I'd mention it. All right, so it is just about 6:45. So I think I see Dan Hayes and Jackie Mendonza. And thanks for joining us, guys. So are we ready to do a budget review? Is there anybody else you need to still come into the meeting?
Yeah, we should have the superintendent and probably the director of finance.
Okay, all right.
They're both coming, but if they're late, I can start, Jackie, and we can kind of go from there. I don't want to hold you guys up or waste your time. So we'll just wait, give them another minute.
Okay, that sounds good.
Well, actually, you know what? Well, I'm sorry, Becky.
Oh, I was just wasting time. I was
Oh,
just gonna tease Ryan about his photo.
That's not very nice.
It's a very nice photo, Ryan.
Instead of wasting time, why don't we get right into it? Are you okay with that, Jackie? So you've been sent the budget for FY24. I'm hoping that you appreciate the way it's been submitted. We always try to take your feedback and make sure that we give you all of the information that you're looking for. Our goal is always transparency. However, I will say, having worked with many different finance committees over the years, everyone likes to see it in a different format. One of the things I think you'll see on the first page, which is where it shows use of funding and funding totals. I think that is a pretty good little snapshot of the budget. It also shows you where the largest increases are coming from. If you can look at that, you'll see under plant and operations and maintenance, that's really one of the hugest increases in terms of percentages. It's 22.14%, an increase of about $51,000. I think $23,000 of that is fuel, 7,500 was in maintenance, 4,000 in power, some of it with the new telephone networking system. So that was really, I think, the largest chunk. As you know, the cost of fuel and everything else has been fluctuating. I think Caitlin did a really good job of trying to come up with what she and we believe is going to be the cost of fuel and power for next year. Obviously, we're hoping to use under that, and if we do, then we would have a surplus in the budget, which comes back to you. Caitlin's also provided a lot of information, I think, all throughout, including, I think, a last page, which was a request for some of the funding sources that we are getting for ESSER and school choice. The ESSER funds are grants, and those have been displayed there as well. So if you're looking at the budget, the total for this year is, I have the number right, 2,359,670. Is that right, Caitlin, who's joined us?
Yes, that is right. That's the total uses of funding, the $2,541,501, and then subtracting the revenue sources from that would leave $2,359,670.
Right, and that comes out to about a 4.83% increase. And as I mentioned earlier, part of that is our expectations or predictions on the cost of fuel and power.
I will add that we have already spent out our entire fuel line for the budget for this current year, and we do anticipate that it's not going to go down from here.
Okay. So, Caitlin, we didn't want to waste time, so I kind of gave an overview of the budget. Why don't we open it up to questions?
Yeah. Before we do that, Dan, I just wanted to welcome Caitlin. I think this is the first time the Finance Committee has had a chance. I know you've worked with Susie, who's our representative on the school committee, but just want to welcome you to the committee and thank you for taking the time to walk us through the budget tonight. So appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Okay.
So AJ.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing that. You know, I guess I didn't even realize that Caitlin hadn't met everybody. She's doing a wonderful job in Union 28. The school, it's great to be able to get information. She's also easy to work with. So when you want something, all you have to do is ask. So thank you, Caitlin. And thank you, AJ, for bringing that up.
Sure.
All right. So now we'll take questions.
Okay. Guys, just utilize the hands up. I see Bob has already started. So why don't we start with you, Bob?
Hi, thanks, AJ. Good to see everybody at school. And I really am impressed by the presentation, by the way you organized these numbers. And it's pretty clear what you're trying to do, and it makes a difference in terms of its interpretability, you know, so for us, at least for me. The thing that I brought up every year, and I'm going to bring up again this year, is an issue that concerns me, and that is the way that the school choice money and ESSER money is dealt with in this budget. The way it actually, in my opinion, it It doesn't mean that I don't support every line in the budget in terms of expenses, but I like to see it done more clearly and rationally, in the sense that if you look at the school choice and ESSER money being in a separate box, literally, on the end of the document, I don't think it belongs there. I think that those funds support the budget, like many other sources that the school has, including Chapter 70, other various grants and other streams of revenue. They are applied to the budget and they reduce the amount that the levy to the town is required. However, the expenses that are listed there, maybe this is a philosophical difference, but I'll try to explain my position, which is this. The expenses are the expenses, and this school choice money represents money that comes to the town when we don't get Chapter 70 money for these students. There's a whole other issue about school choice, whether it's good or bad for the town, for the state. I'll leave that behind for the moment, but it does mean we get $5,000 per student instead of the Chapter 70 money. And I understand some of the logic. It's been explained to me why we're doing it. But my point is that that money, the measly amount of money, is a fraction of what it costs us to educate our students, our native students, you might call them. And we need to count that as revenue. I mean, and then the school can present its budgetary request to this committee. This committee can review it and make recommendations to town meeting. That's the way the process works. But we need a clear idea of what you're requesting. And so when I look at the items that are in that box, I see a lot of items that are repeating items that I've seen in previous budgets. You know, they don't seem to accord with the notion that's been explained to me that these are all related to special needs that are one-time operations and that they are maybe COVID related if in the case of ESSER. I see it just as things that are like this, many things in this budget that are flexible, that are dynamic, that change from year to year because of the special needs of our student body. And so I've always seen enough of these budgets to know that this does change. Like, for example, one of the many times, Jackie, that I went to see your school was to investigate a leak in the speech therapist office. And this was before COVID. So, you know, you've had them in the past and you'll have them again when situation requires. I think there's some kind of sharing deal with the region on those staff, but I'd just like to see these expenses support as part of the budget. And I'd like to see the line for the revolving fund. And I do understand that's a revolving fund. And I've studied Pelham, I've studied Leverett, I've studied the regional school budget, which I've received recently. And all of them show that school choice money, which is, again, not any more in control and specifically of the finance committee or town meeting than the other line of your budget, is part of your expense, that your request for funding. So if Amherst does it this way, and in Amherst, it seems to me that the finance committee decides how much comes out of the fund every year and is applied to the budget. That's what my reading of what that document said that I saw last week. But in Pelham and in Leverett, I'm pretty sure that there's conversations between the school committee and the finance committee about what the balance should be in that revolving fund and how much will go towards supporting of the budget. So that's what I would like to see. That's my concern about this document.
So if I could take a stab at that, and then anyone
Please,
else
Dan.
can feel free to. So Bob, I always appreciate your questions. And honestly, you know, this money over time has accumulated, and we sort of weren't paying attention that it was accumulating. We weren't really in need of using it. And then suddenly we look at it and it had grown. So we are working on really a plan of how those funds could be applied to the budget on a routine basis. That might mean we reach a certain threshold and then that money goes automatically to the budget. I will say, and this is just a personal feeling, and it's probably not, I'll just say, we don't have an E&D fund. So when we need something, we do have to come directly to the town. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's great that the town is always supportive of the school. But I will say, especially during these times with COVID, having to be nimble and pivot quickly, it's been a roller coaster ride. And I've been doing this for 20 years this year. It was really nice to have that fund because we needed it for what we thought were supports for students. We could have come to the town. We could have asked if there was how that money could be appropriated for us. You mentioned town meeting, and I hope we wouldn't have to go that route. But it was nice to have that money to be able to support our students without really having to go anywhere. I will say also, and I think I've said this before, we try to be very careful with the budget. We look at it from a zero-based budgeting perspective, one teacher in each grade, one principal, one nurse. We look at the paraprofessionals. Do we need them in those positions? We don't just rehire based upon what we've had in the previous year. We don't look at our budget and say, well, let's just go up this percentage. And I think you all know that, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But to your point, Bob, I think we are really trying to figure out how is the best way to use school choice funds that won't have a negative impact on our school or our students. I've also spoken with and worked with people in Pelham and people in Leverett, and we've heard some of the pitfalls that they've had. I do understand some of how they use it in their budget on an ongoing basis. So I think to really answer your question tonight, I don't think we're quite there, but I think it is something that we're working on, but we're using that money mindfully.
I just wanted to just add on to what you're saying, because it's all exactly obviously what I would say. But we did start a document that the school committee did review, and we basically have agreed upon it. We haven't voted on anything yet, but that document was shared with Susie. I'm sure that was probably shared with you, that outlines in 5 steps what we're considering to do with the school choice money. I put a real lot of thought into this. And it even has outlined what we're not asking from the town in our general budget, but what we're using in terms of paying for people power that we need at the school next year, which amounts to $153,807 that we are using out of school choice and not putting in our budget, because we know that the other costs are increasing our budget higher than it's ever been, which we are very aware of what happens with that. So that I have that document. I'm happy to share it with anybody who wants to see it. But those positions include an English language teacher, because that's an extremely transient population through Shutesbury. And by law, when we receive somebody who's an English language learner, we have to provide them with a specific and special type of teacher that is licensed. And we will have that need next year. So it includes that. It includes an essential skills teacher that helps us do our COVID pandemic recovery work, which we're still working on. That means basically extra help, a teacher with specialized skills to give really focused support. It includes a little bit more time with our speech language pathologists, which is one of the areas of the biggest deficit from COVID, particularly amongst our kids who are 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old. It's an increase a little bit with our math coach, because again, math was one of those areas that was really hit hard. And it also includes a paraeducator that we really need in the building to be able to support some of the special education needs that we're having and seeing with our students. So those are all positions that we really need at this point, but we're using our school choice money to pay for them, because when and if that need goes away and we can take it away, it's not going to take away of the need for our general operation. These are all kind of transient needed positions now, but might not be there next year.
Absolutely. And when we look at Caitlin's budget page, we do have other funding sources in there, right? So we look at the gross total and then revenue sources. And that's where our ESSER funding comes in until we don't have it anymore. That's where some school choice funding comes in and some Title I funding. But we do have to be careful that all of our Title I funding doesn't go to the general budget in order to just support the budget, because then we would be cited for supplanting the budget and not supplementing the budget. So there is funding there. We do have it. It's explained briefly on the summary page, but we are supporting the general budget with school choice, with ESSER funding, and with title and IDEA grant funding, as well as rural aid.
I think Bob had his hand up and then George.
Okay, I just want to make a brief response. Thank you, Jen, for that. And I just want to be clear that I did not object to any of the items that you put in your budget. My point was simply about the way it's being handled and accounted for in the budget. I think that if you do it this way, then the budget increase is smaller in effect when you look at the document. I just want to be honest about what we're spending and what revenue we're getting and what the cost to the taxpayer is in the end. That's my concern. I'm not looking at any line item here and objecting to any of it. I understand you have a lot of challenges because of recent history and so forth. And I don't object. I'm not criticizing you on any of those counts, okay? It's just to be clear. I'm concerned about the accounting thing because, you know, I know Dan said it's very convenient to have this discretionary fund. So if something comes up, we don't have to go to the town. Well, I'm sorry, this is a public institution. This is not the way it works. We fund this with our tax dollars, and we have to be aware of how things are going and what we're voting to approve or recommend. And we can't provide the school with a slush fund or a discretionary fund. That's not the way I see it, that the system should work. So that's just to be clear. I'm not objecting to hiring teachers to teach English as a second language or have speech pathologists or any of the same. I'm talking about the way this document is organized. That's all.
Just to respond, Bob, I mean, on just one point, and I see we got a couple of hands up, but just because I just want to connect it to something you said. So if one of your concerns is that this approach to accounting for how these funds are being used is somehow kind of masking the true increase from one fiscal year to the next, I mean, it seems to me that would be an issue that's really only relevant for the first year that this proposed change to the way we're accounting for these funds is made. Like the school committee has developed a plan that specifies the circumstances or the criteria they're going to use to determine how they're going to spend these funds every year. They are going to spend the funds they're going to spend some amount of these funds every year using those criteria. So the idea that like somehow we're obscuring the true increase from one year to the next of what the school's budget is, it really seems to me it's like only an issue for that first year when we would be transitioning to this other way of accounting for these funds that you're recommending, right? I mean, so I know that's not the only issue that you have with this approach, but it did seem to be one of them, and I'm not sure that's it isn't like a long-term thing. Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, and Bob, because I'd like to come back around a little bit to I think what you're saying, AJ, and honestly, I really have to take blame, I guess, in this case, for sort of part of the way this is structured. And the reason is, again, going back to the way we budget, zero-based budgeting, we want to show you what our budget, what we need in our budget to run that school. Some of these other items are things that we don't anticipate being long-term. So part of me feels like I'm happy to move these and put them into line items. But each year I feel like it's going to be difficult to create these spreadsheets to explain or driver pages to explain, oh, that position is only a one-year position. Or, you know, if we create another position or add another position, you know, is that going to be going on for, 10 years? I think what we're trying to show you is that we anticipate this to be a very limited time frame or a temporary. So again, we can do it any way that you as the finance committee would like the information presented. I think in the end, we're kind of doing the same thing. Although for me personally, my approach is really to show what the school needs to run. And this is sort of what we anticipate to be very temporary, but I've done a lot of talking. So Jim, you had your hands up, and then George.
Jim Hemingway?
Oh,
Jim Hemingway.
George was in front of me, I think.
George, do you want to?
Yeah, so a few points. first of all, I do appreciate that you're being transparent about it every year. The last few years, how this school choice money is being used has been documented very clearly. And it's not unusual for other departments in town of Shutesbury to have other sources of funds that aren't shown in the operating budget. So what you're doing is not necessarily consistent with other departments are doing because of the way the funding's mechanisms work. I think one solution I think would be very helpful is, like the budget, we see year to year what we're spending in each line. Wouldn't it be helpful if we could see how school choice funds are used year to year? So in other words, if last year's was here and we had the positions that were last year and how much was used in that year's column. And some of these positions might have a zero, some of them might have had an amount last year, maybe next year, at some point they drop off. And then we can see the history of how these funds have been used. And everything in that category, of course, is temporary, whether temporary is 1 year or 3 years. So I think that would help with the transparency. I personally, I understand Bob's point. Bob, I totally understand your point, but I do believe that, I've seen budgets where a line is added, $1 is put in it, it's in the operating budget, and then it disappears, and it's in there forever, but we don't really use it. And it's not really funded from property taxes because it's being funded from the money that's coming from school choice. So one suggestion I would like to make is what's in the very last page here is very helpful. It would be good if we had the historical perspective on the past years, and then we could really monitor those. And the reason I even thought of that was I was going to ask, looking at the $69,000 increase in instruction, I can see, the various lines, and in my mind, clearly the line numbers are changed, the dollar amounts increase in like lines 35, 36, 37, 39 is really reflective of the changing needs within the organization, and certain positions like the therapeutic services needs to be increased because you anticipate the demand there. That's really helpful to see. My question is, are any of these increases or these amounts that were previously funded by last year or any other year, the school choice funds? Do we know if anything that was once school choice funds became permanent and has now been baked into this fiscal 24 request?
I don't believe so. The therapeutic services line, the reason for that increase is because we were contracting with CAPS Collaborative for PT services. They raised their rates by about 23%. So we've hired a Union 28 wide physical therapist. So you see the increase in the therapeutic services because now that they're an employee, they are in that line. Whereas if we did not hire them, you would have seen a large increase in the special ed contracted services, line 40. You would have seen a large increase in that line instead. So the physical therapists, although they're only a 0.12 FTE for Shutesbury, that's where we have that increase, is in therapeutic services line.
Okay.
So George?
Yes.
You made a suggestion about how to present that information. What I would like is for the finance committee to let us know how they would like the information to be presented. I don't think it's difficult for us to give you rows and columns showing what those services were year to year and how it was spent. Bob also asking to insert it within the budget itself. Honestly, we can do whatever you want, but you as a committee can talk about it. You let us know what you'd like us to do. We'll do it.
Yeah, happy to. If AJ, if you'll put that in the agenda for future conversations.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to.
Right, as opposed to having this discussion tonight about what we want to see or how you want to see it.
But yeah, one thing I want to say, Caitlin, welcome. And this format we've been using, the school committee's been using for for a number of years now. And Caitlin, clearly you get it. This looks awesome. And it is, I don't know if there's any other information you can give us other than maybe the enrollment numbers we asked for and a few other things. So I really do appreciate that. And, I understand Bob's point, but I think, again, keeping the things that aren't being requested from the budget, from the town from the taxpayers directly is better served in the bottom like this. And I'm happy to show a format if the finance committee agrees with that. So we'll talk about that. The only other item I really wanted to talk about was the fuel line and the utilities line. Most of the fuel line, when you made your last purchase, what was the price of fuel per barrel? And what was the rate you paid? Is that really likely to be the rate you're going to pay next year? You know, this was an extraordinary year with fuel prices. And at one point, fuel peaked at about $120, $125 a barrel. Right now, it's trading at about $76 a barrel. So, you know, I'm inclined not to want to increase that line to the extent that you're showing it.
Right.
I
We were
think
going to bring that up. I was just going to say, you know, this is my 9th year at Shutesbury as the principal. So I've done a lot of oil ordering. And this year, you know, we usually in the fall when we fill the tank, it's usually around $7,000. This fall it was 20. And that was a lot. And then it was, you know, 4 something a gallon. And then we just filled it again recently and it was down by $1 per gallon. So it has come down a little. It's obviously still a lot more than what we used to pay, but it has come down. And, you know, Jen, Caitlin and I were talking about this today, and that is something like that if the committee wanted to say, you know, we really would recommend that you don't actually put the increase in there that you were thinking was going to happen. We can certainly do that, and it would certainly lower the percentage, but there runs the risk of next year it being 4 something a gallon again, and then we're in a little bit of trouble. But we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball. There's no question about it. But, you know, this year, the circumstances were just so unique. And the world's learning to live with, you know, the oil environment that we're in at this moment. And it looks like it's going to continue for a while.
Right. So George, I could also argue that for me, the crystal ball looking at the horizon with China opening up and demand increasing and supply not increasing at the same time, I'm not sure if it's going to be higher next year than it is this year.
Yeah, we don't know, but I just think that, you know, we shouldn't increase the line just on one year's unique events. So, you know, if it would be great if we could trim this budget a little, and I see that as you know, it's great if we can trim any budget, not just the school budget. Obviously, the school budget, this is a big increase. It's much bigger than you've been asking for in past years. I understand why, and I see this as maybe one way of just trimming it back a little. And you know,
And
we
as
always have
Jackie
to,
alluded to, yeah, we sort of have thoughts about where we can really maybe narrow down the budget in particular line items. So we don't mind going back and meeting again and seeing what we can do about that.
great. Thank you.
Let's see, since we haven't heard from Susie yet, why don't we go to Susie and then
Jim Hemingway.
Jim and Bob.
I just want to say we can, as the FinCom can discuss fuel costs and how maybe some alternative ways of funding a specific increase, and we'll get back to you. So that'll be our work, and it'll be more than your department. It'll be other places too.
Jim Hemingway?
Yes, first of all, Caitlin and everybody on the school committee, I really appreciate the clarity of this report. I wish it were emulated elsewhere in all the reports that we get. It's very clear and very comprehensive. I have several questions. On line 84, the networking and telecommunications up 200%. And then on line 77, school telephone, 117% increase, which are rather dramatic increases. Does this reflect any of the possibility that the capital planning committee will be able to, or possibly will be able to contribute money for the new telephone system? I was wondering if that was.
Yeah, and Jackie can speak to the phone. I can speak to line 84, networking and telecommunications.
Sure.
So all of the schools and central office operate on a platform for budgeting through Tyler Technologies, and it's called Budget Sense. And a few years ago, we hosted it on our own server. Ransomware came in through our email and infected our server, and we lost a lot of data. So we moved the hosting to our technology IT team for Union 28, SUSER IT. And we were having some issues with budgeting since over the past year. And when we spoke to SUSER IT, he had reached out to Tyler Technologies, and the long and short of it is that they're not allowing any outside IT services to be the host, to support it. And in having that conversation, we also realized the last time that platform was updated, I think our version is from 1999 or 2000.
Dear
And
God.
so we looked at some other options. Staying with Tyler was the least expensive, but we do need to update the platform, and it will be an increase from what we're seeing before. And this particular coming fiscal year, we will have a one-time startup charge. So that's line 84. We need to update our financial software.
I see.
How much of that $10,000 increase is this one-time kind of startup?
About 2,500 of it.
Got it.
And that's to provide trainings and to move us over to Tyler Technology so that we can update it and have it functional. Those expenses used to belong in a Union 28 portion of the budget. When we started investigating this increase, we realized that really that doesn't belong in the Union 28 budget because it's not based on enrollment. It's split over the 4 schools, and every school uses it equally. And it's not just central office that uses it. It's mostly the main offices in the schools and the custodians and the food service. And so it belongs better in the Shutesbury and all of the other school budgets. So you'll see the decrease to in the Union 28 portion of the budget on line 25. The computer contracted services went from $4,040 down to $0 because we removed that from the Union 28 part of the budget.
That's helpful.
I can really speak to the phones. So
Yeah.
the phones are not included in that line that you were just talking about. The phone. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to be able to just handle the phones as a school this year, because due to Debbie Lee and her amazing, really amazing work and research, she is incredible. We are going with Crocker, as I think you know, and it's like around into the $5,000 to $7,000 range for it to be installed and us to be trained. And then there is a little bit of an increase in our monthly charges, a pretty decent increase, but it won't be the same amount. This is something that I think we can trim, by a little bit. I'm kind of confused as to what line we were at. Was it 77?
7.
77. Okay, yeah. So we had said an increase of $3,500. We might be able to just make that more like 2,000 or 1,500 of an increase. So that will come down a little bit. And that will obviously, we're hoping to go live with our new system by March 1st. So which is really exciting. So no, it doesn't, this is nothing like a pre-planning for any of that or a padding of the budget for that. This is just reflecting what we thought the monthly cost would be, but it's going to actually be a little less.
Okay.
Jackie, I think in capital planning, when we got the numbers for this new Crocker setup, we were told that the monthly charge will be $376.40, and that rate was locked in for 3 years. So I'm wondering if we might be able to reduce this line to like, $4,500.
I don't think that should be a problem at all.
How
We
about,
definitely can do that.
how about 4,550? Because it goes over
Yeah, I
4,500.
think it's 45.17. So yeah, we can say maybe 45.50 is a good idea.
Or
Okay.
70.
Jim, did you have did you have another question or?
Yeah. Yeah, I have one more or a couple more. the food service drop on line 73. This is, I suspect, due to the determination by the federal and state to provide free lunches for school kids. And and if they're going to provide that, then this would reduce presumably the cost. Is that the reason why the food service line has dropped?
Yeah, we don't have a magic crystal ball, so we don't know what the government is going to do next year. And back pre-COVID, we really relied on this line to be able to support our food service. Our school committee feels very strongly that the children should not be penalized if, you know, bills aren't paid and stuff like that, and they deserve to have the same hot meal as everyone else. And so what that means, though, is that we often run in the deficit because things happen and people don't always pay, and we have to make up that difference. So we don't know what's going to happen. I haven't even heard inklings. I don't know if Jen has about that. Like last year we heard, oh, we think they're going to extend it for this year, which they did, but I'm not hearing that this year. So I wouldn't want to take that away and be in trouble if that wasn't the case.
I was just wondering if the proposed drop is going to turn out to be one of those unfunded mandates that we wind up, they drop it one year and then they sort of forget about it the following years. It seems to be kind of unsteady in that respect. There's nothing much we can do about it, of course, but I was I wanted your opinion on that. Thank you very much. Minor thing, the rural aid, the grant that we're getting from rural aid jumped $20,000. Is this a one-time thing, or do you suspect this will continue at that level, or perhaps increase even more?
I think Caitlin can talk to this a little bit, but I mean, again, every year we cross our fingers that they're going to keep rural aid coming, and luckily it's been happening, but Caitlin might be able to
and historically, Shutesbury didn't get rural aid the first year that they did rural aid, and then they recalculated the formula. So we really never know exactly what amount we're going to get. It's based on the legislature deciding how they're going to allocate money for that line item in the state budget.
Okay. And I would just like to mention that Jennifer's been very involved in that rural aid committee that has been advocating to our legislators. So it was because of people like her that gathered together and advocated for this that we're even getting that money. And I think we have some good representation, specifically, I think I would say Joe Comerford, who recognizes that we need that aid. So seeing it going up is a positive thing, and I appreciate, Jennifer, you being a part of that. Caitlin.
Thank you.
Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I guess I'll ask Dan this question. I'm looking at the revenue sources again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that the preschool was funded by tuition, at least in part. Is that no longer true? Is that no longer the case? And if it is the case, where is that money represented in this document?
So the line 115 EC revolving is the early childhood revolving. So the tuition is used to pay some of the salaries, some of the salary of the preschool teacher.
Okay, so that's in that line. What would you say, 151?
115.
115.
Yeah.
Those are
And
the
Bob,
revenue sources.
Bob, this is something you and I have talked about several times over the past 9 years. We have a duty as a public institution to provide special education services for any child that turns 3 and are older. And our, just so happens that in the world and life right now, we have a lot of students that are 3 and 4 years old that need services. And those students get to come and get those services for free because we are a public school. So the only students that have to pay tuition are students that come that do not receive special education services. And in this particular time and place, it's about half and half, so that we don't have a lot of money coming in.
Right. So I think if I could just add to that, that for me, from a financial perspective, having a preschool program really is cost effective, because otherwise we would have to place these students out of district, which is very expensive, and sometimes also paying for transportation. So the other students who are there on a tuition basis, we look at that, we look at the tuition rates to be competitive, to bring in the revenue to help support the program. But I feel like if we didn't have that preschool program, that line item would be much, much higher.
Just to be clear, I wasn't criticizing the program.
I know.
Where the revenue was represented in the document. Because, you know, I don't know what all the details about the preschool, Jackie, and I'm not criticizing the idea of a preschool or the implementation, except in this respect, that if there are kids coming from other towns, they should probably be paying for it, you know?
We do not accept school choice for preschool. School choice begins at kindergarten.
I see. Okay. Well, the one last thing I wanted to mention was that in one of the documents that I have been studying, Pelham, they do provide the Finance Committee with a spreadsheet which shows the historic history of the revolving fund for school choice. And they show how much is in the account at a given moment and how the account was managed and how much was put against the budget in a given year. And that document is provided with their budget to the Finance Committee. I think it's I'll share it with you, Dan, and with you all.
So Bob, I promise you, our committee is gonna have a discussion about what changes, if any, we want made to how the school budget information is presented in the future. And so we will definitely.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that to Dan, that's all, while he was here.
Yep. And Bob, I just want to make one comment.
It's not okay.
I appreciate when you ask questions. And when you ask questions, we should have answers. And when we don't have answers, we need to get those answers. And I don't ever look at you asking a question as being a criticism of anything. You just don't know. And that's what we're here to do, is answer your question. So thank you for your questions.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any other committee members have a question about the school budget? We are running a little behind here, so I think we should try to wrap up soon. That's Jim Walton.
Yeah, just a general question. This has to do with salaries and union. What year are we in with regard to the union current contract? And when does that contract expire?
So the budget that has been presented for FY24, we know that what those salaries are going to be because that is the last year of the contract. So next year's conversation will be at the same time as contract negotiations.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess this isn't so much a question about this specific budget, but where do we stand with the start for the negotiations for the next contract? So this is more, thinking of the future budgets.
So next year, FY24 will be where they're negotiating for FY25.
Okay.
And that's a really good question, Jim, because I think you're probably reading in the paper, there's been some really rough negotiations with school districts all across the state. And
yeah. And that's, I'm trying to get a sense from you all, what maybe this is a follow-up question, is what your expectations might be going forward, given inflation, given what you're talking about, Jackie. What's your current thinking or expectations?
Well, I can tell you this, and we're really proud of it, right? We have a really, really positive, strong culture at our school right now. We have, it's a really nice place to be working and learning. And so, right now there's a general sense of goodness, but, I think I wouldn't put it past the teachers, really requesting an increase in things. And usually they come prepared with other schools in the union and in the area and their pay scales, and they try to find something, similar. And but they're pretty reasonable in general. Like our teachers are pretty reasonable, but I can't tell you what it will be like next year.
And I would say overall, the past year or so, most of our negotiations have gone pretty smoothly. I think both sides are pretty fair in hearing each other out and then coming to a compromise.
Thanks.
Thanks. All right. So I think we should shift gears. Mary Lou, I see you have your hand up. If it's okay with you, I think we're going to take public kind of comments or questions towards the end of the meeting tonight. We got a really crazy agenda tonight. We're already 15 minutes behind. So if you can just kind of hang on to your question and comment, and we'll try to get to it before we wrap up. So I just want to thank all the representatives from the school committee and for being with us tonight and doing such a great job at both sharing information and answering our questions. So there are a couple things, follow-up things that we as a committee need to discuss, including presentation of the budget and suggestions for some cuts. And so we'll be in touch about them, probably through Susie. So thanks so much for being here.
Thank
Again, I
you
want
for
to
having us. Thanks for your questions.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I want to thank Caitlin again for
Yes,
providing the budget documents in a really transparent, readable, understandable way. And I know that she'd be willing to take whatever suggestions that you have. So thank you all, and we appreciate your help. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Good night. Thank you.
Night.
Okay. All right. Next up is Ryan. Hi, Ryan. Sorry, we're running a little bit late.
No
but,
worries. I
I
came
feel that
prepared
might
with tax bills to stuff while I sat and watched. So I've been fine. I enjoy you do have I've been working with Jen for a long time, and Jackie and Caitlin now obviously for a short time, but you have a very strong leadership team over there, and it's always nice to hear them.
Great. Okay, so we've got a bunch of documents, and I guess we should kind of talk through them in whatever order makes sense to you. So why don't you let us know?
I don't have a set order here, so I'm just gonna go with the order that I have them up on my
Sure.
screen, as long as everyone is comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That means that the very first one I have here is our veterans budget. As you can see, the request this year is level funding. The goal of this budget is to help offset and pay the costs. Go ahead, Becky.
There are some members of the public. Could we put the budgets up online?
Yeah, maybe I can, I think I can share, right? Did you give me permission? Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll try to pop them up as we're talking about them.
Awesome. So if a veteran is to move to the community, the town is responsible for that cost. At this time, we don't have one, and we have not had one for years now. So we have been level funding this budget with no change to it for it's probably been 4 years now, to be honest.
All right, great. What's next?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of
Go
hear
through them and then questions after. Okay,
and then we'll take questions about.
that's
yeah.
perfectly fine. Treasurer budget. There is the one that I have next here, which would be my department's budget as far as our costs go. The main increase here is that of postage. The rates for that increased in January. My office does require a lot of postage, but other than that is a nominal increase in the budget here. Next would be the tax title budget. The tax title budget, this is the same budget that we are working with from last year. The purpose of this is to allow for the cost and expenditure of attorney that we utilize when we go after properties that are sitting in tax title, as well as land court filing fees and the never-ending costs that go along with navigating these.
So can you just tell us what the budget for this was last year?
I believe it was the same.
Same. Okay, so this is level. Okay. All right.
I can tell you on one. Yes. If you, I'll double check that. If you want to pull up the next one, is the health insurance one.
Sure, it's okay.
Yes, it was the same as last year.
Okay.
So the next budget we have is usually the most controversial one. It's the health insurance budget. I have done an estimation here as if the town was to take on an additional family, an additional individual onto our healthcare plan, which of course it's impossible to actually predict what would happen. I then did also include a 2% increase. At the time that I submitted this budget, the Hampshire County Group Insurance Trust had not yet held a meeting to determine whether there would be an increase. The trust has since voted to increase their rate 6% in the coming year. I do feel confident after meeting with the town administrator and reviewing the past budget that we're very close with this request that I've submitted. And I don't necessarily believe we need to increase it further from here. The only reason why I would suggest increasing it further would be if the town plans on hiring a lot more people.
Okay, so you're saying the 542K could absorb the 6% rate increase? That
I'm torn on that. Becky has her hand up and I'd be curious to see what her thoughts are on it, to be honest.
Becky?
I do not think the increase is needed at all. We had about an $85,000 surplus last year, which was greatly received into free cash. But given that fact, I think the 6% increase will account for less than $40,000. And I think $40,000 should leave us ample room
To absorb.
additional
new-
costs.
Okay.
And I did.
You're recommending we actually revert back to last year's 520K?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah, because currently, in the end of January, we've only spent 50% of the
50%.
budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got about, we're at where are we? Yeah, so we've got an extra month's worth of float in there, Ryan. That's what's making me think we might be okay. We should be okay. I know there've been changes from 22 to 23. But I think being the fact that we're 40,000 ahead right now, halfway through the year, it's likely we could be 70,000 by the end of the year, 60 or 70. Which should be able to take care of the changes. But that's, you guys all need to weigh in.
All right, so we've got two sort of proposals here. One is to level fund this at 520K, and the other proposal will be to fund this at the 542,000 we're seeing here. Okay. So we might get some questions about that when we get to questions. What do you want? Which one do you want to do next?
Short-term borrowing is next. Usually a not nearly as exciting as health insurance. So the plan for the short-term borrowing is $2,000 level funding. Purpose of the short-term borrowing line item is it allows us to cover the costs associated with any type of borrowing that we do with the town, such as paying our financial advisor, going out to bid, the invoices, etc. Next is the unemployment budget. This would be, again, level funding, a $5,000 contribution to the unemployment trust that the town has set up. Again, my only recommendation really for increasing this would be if the town has, these are kind of just like my go-to every year. If the town plans on doing major layoffs, then we want to change this, for obvious reasons, but otherwise I think we're more than comfortable level funding it at the 5,000.
Do you know how much we have in the fund right now, the unemployment fund?
I think I do, but I'm the kind of person who would like use the calculator for 2 plus 2 just to be certain that I'm right. We have about 16,000 in there right now.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Of course. Next would be the OPEB trust. This would also be a level funded suggestion of $50,000. The goal, of course, is to continue to demonstrate that we're working towards funding that liability. We recently had the actuarial that demonstrated that we are one of the communities that is doing a good job putting in the good faith effort to doing so. And there are many communities in the Commonwealth who have not shown the success that we have. And that was very positively received.
And just to let you know, Ryan, we did discuss OPEB at, I can't remember, I think it might have been our last meeting. And I think there was sort of general consensus was to continue this contribution, this level of contribution. Okay,
I believe next is the Medicare tax budget. The line item here I have increasing by 3%. The 3% increase is just based solely kind of on the assumption that there would be a 3% COLA overall across wages throughout the municipality. So if we're not expecting any type of increase, or if you're expecting to do a major increase, you might want to increase this even further. But the 3% would put us in a really safe position.
Looks good.
And lastly is the OPEB actuarial. I believe this is, I want to say this is level funded, but I'm actually kind of questioning it now, to be honest. It's not.
Current year's budget is 2250.
Yeah, so this is actually, I have that we budgeted 5,000 actually for FY23.
Well, I'm looking at the expense report on page 2, and it says OPEB actuarial study allocated 2,250. You may have requested 5,000 last year, Ryan, but that doesn't mean that's what we budgeted.
Yeah, I must be looking at the draft, which this tends to be what happens to me in my requests. So
Sorry about that.
the actuarial study is usually around $6,000. We're probably like, it'll probably be slightly over 6,000 by the time we do it again. So the goal is usually on my end is I try to put a $2,000 in there each year. We have, I think, a slight balance in there so that when we go to do the actuarial, we always have enough. And this 2,000 rolling in continues to keep that funded. And I think that's it, unless that was 9, I think, right?
Yeah.
all right. Thanks for doing that. And guys, thanks for sort of holding comments. I just thought it'd be faster if we heard the sort of bottom line on all of them. And then, so if folks have questions about any of those items, Susie.
Ryan, this year I sent you a form that had all of the accounts and their current year so that we can see the level, the funding for FY23 and compare it. I think that would be helpful if you use that form instead of all these separate pages. You can just use the form that tells what happened in the current year, and then we'll be able to see the increases, and that would be helpful to me.
I will definitely do that.
All right, Bob.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Susie said. It's hard for me to sort of comprehend what we're talking about when I don't know what was left over in last year's budget, when I don't know what the level was historically. I didn't see this document till just very recently, so I didn't have a chance to go back and kind of cross-reference last year's budget and to see. But I have one question. The veterans level, you say level funded. Do we have a residuum in that account? Did we pay anything out the last couple of years? Are we, what's the accumulated residuum that's in that account? I assume it stays there. Doesn't it?
Free cash.
Does it? Okay, so in that case, then it makes sense, but I couldn't see that. The treasurer, you said it was just a reasonably small increase in your budget, but how much?
I can tell you that in 1 second. And for Susie, if you could also, because you could send that to me again, because I can't find any email from you, and I would be happy to use a different format. I also find this one kind of clunky. So for FY23,
Which account are you looking for, Ryan?
the treasurer's line item, because
Treasurer's expense.
I think it was reduced, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, this year's budget's 12,280.
Yeah, so this is actually a reduction in, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I removed, yes, so it's kind of a reduction. Because last year I had requested that we had compensated myself for my phone usage. And there was a lot of discussion from the finance committee that they did not like that idea. So I removed that from my request this year, and it's not something that I've received compensation for.
Well, thank you. I guess we can discuss these things when we get a chance to look them over for our future meetings. So thank you, Ryan.
Of course.
Jim Hemingway and then Jim Walton. Jim, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I had the phone rang before. The veterans 4K budget, that is not rolled over every year. That goes into free cash. George, did I hear you right on that?
I believe that's true. I actually, Becky or Ryan should confirm it.
That is true.
That would make sense from looking at the expense report, because,
I don't see why it isn't rolled over every year, since it's sort of an ongoing thing. We can build it up or take it down. It would be more sensible to roll it over year by year, then we wouldn't have to keep on coughing up 4,000 or 5,000 or whatever it is. Just a suggestion. My second question is, has to do with OPEB. Last year, you informed us that Bartholomew Associates was using our money in what they call an aggressive portfolio of some sort. I wonder if that has changed this year.
I actually, if I recall correctly, we were actually in kind of we were in like a lower to moderate aggressive level. And after our actuarial review with Odyssey, and they came and did a PowerPoint presentation with the finance committee, and I joined in on that as well. They recommended that we be more aggressive with it. So at my annual review with Bartholomew, we did increase it to like the next level tier to be somewhat more aggressive. It is still, of course, based on safety first and follows all the Massachusetts legal guidelines, but it is a little more aggressive than it was prior based on what Odyssey had recommended in their actuarial last year.
Well, an aggressive portfolio nowadays, or at least in the last year, probably has cost us some money, because the stock market has done very, very poorly. As you know, don't they have, or wouldn't you suggest to perhaps switching over to treasuries or something like that to bring us some more stable income during a period of high inflation, which is what we're in right now? I mean, that would be the sensible thing to do from an investment point of view.
Unfortunately, I don't believe that I personally am in the position with the knowledge to manage that over Bartholomew Investments. They have the knowledge and the success and the manpower to do so successfully. So I do default to their judgment when it comes to how the funds are invested after our annual review. We meet annually to ensure that things aren't doing terribly. We touch base on a quarterly basis to make sure if things aren't performing in a capacity that we feel is in the benefit of the town, then we'll make an adjustment as needed. But I do default to their judgment and our meetings with them. I don't interfere with them on a daily, monthly basis.
Yeah. So they're the ones that make the determination about what portfolio they're going to apply to our OPEB funds. Is that correct?
The specific investments, like individual accounts and portfolios, they do, but overall I do, of course, have my signature on it as the person making the decision. But there is also a list that the state of Massachusetts gives them the right to invest in. So like Coca-Cola, for example, is on the list. They can't just pick anyone they want. It's not a legal option.
I'm just trying to get to the heart of, who controls how the town's money is invested. That's all.
I mean, at the end of the day, I am in control of that.
Yeah.
But that's why I utilize the professionals at Bartholomew Investment.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Bartholomew, there are three levels we have Odyssey advisors who require income from us. And we have a Bartholomew, and then they're investing in mutual funds. And boy, by the time commissions are paid to all of these folks in between, it's a miracle that our 50,000 or our total account, which I guess is around 712K now, is actually has some gains from time to time. Do you have any results for 2022 at all? What sort of gain or loss we may have endured during that time? I know you gave us figures for 2021, which was around 5.4%. I was curious about 2022. Have you gotten any figures for that yet?
I had a feeling you were going to ask me that when you started talking. So I was trying to
Yeah.
find. I know for a fact that I don't have a percentage at this time on me. I'm not prepared with that, and I'm happy to get it to you.
Let's do
after
that in the
this
follow-up,
meeting.
yeah, and kind of focus
But I
on.
know that we brought in, at minimum, I would comfortably say around $65,000 in income into the OPEB account in the fiscal year 2022. Just doing like a quick look at the interest that I have calculated, but that's not, like I said, it's not down to the penny, and it isn't an exact interest rate. That's just me trying to find something quickly here.
Jim Walton?
Yeah, this wasn't one of my comments, but I'm concerned. We don't, in the finance committee, want to become investors for our funds. I don't think any of us are probably really qualified for that, including treasuries. Treasuries did have a great year, especially longer term treasuries last year.
Nothing
Sure.
had a good year
And
last year.
sitting on low risk investments, if you're sitting on cash or whatever, you're losing because of inflation right now with inflation wherever it is. So I don't think we want to get into that. And I think we need to trust that Ryan and his team and working with professionals is probably the right way to go. Just a couple of quick items. Ryan, you and Becky have a little bit different versions of funding for insurance. Would you be able to live if we ended up keeping that flat?
I would say that, to be fair, I think this is the closest Becky and I have ever been. So I actually think her and I made really good progress in the time. Yeah, I can see the logic there. I definitely can. The 6%, I was very comfortable after I spoke with Becky before, and I was like, oh yeah, we can default back to 520 before the 6% increase. And that obviously has made me somewhat more nervous, knowing that is certainly going to happen. But at the end of the day, I don't like to see a ton of money left over at the end of the year going into free cash. I just don't think that's good budgeting and good planning. So I could live with it as long as finance committee is prepared. If at the end of the year we need to move money, we have to move money.
Okay.
You know, it's a necessary.
It wouldn't be the first time we've done it.
No, it happens. But yeah, no, I can definitely live with it.
No,
And
Okay.
I would have sent an updated one of these. I was under the impression you already had these, so I didn't want to come with a changed one tonight, and so I apologize with that lack of communication there.
Yeah, and just one last item with OPEB. You talked about the 50,000, and you said that was well received. And what do you mean by where was it well received?
There are, so I obviously go to a lot of conferences and with a lot of speakers from the state, and there are a lot of communities in Massachusetts who aren't doing the due diligence really at all in funding the OPEB. And when we had the actuarial study, that also really alluded to the fact that we are making good progress towards it. And again, why they had recommended maybe being a little more aggressive with it, because we actually do have potential here to continue to improve in this area, whereas there are some cities and towns that aren't putting in that effort, and we don't know how they'll be penalized moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Of course.
George?
Two things. Like Jim, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I agree with what Jim Walton said. You can't react to the market. As soon as you react, the market does something different. What's important is that we're following state guidelines. We have professionals doing the investing. A well-managed portfolio is going to be aligned with the cash flow that is going to follow. In other words, how this money is going to be used. If we need money in the short run, then a portion of the investment is going to be in short-term securities that don't pay as well. If a big chunk of the money is going to be used out in the future, it needs to be more in equities. So there's always a balance. The state knows it, and it's being monitored. That's the way this is invested. And you should never try to time the market, you will lose. And so you have to assume that the state and the professionals know what they're doing on this. And Ryan, you're watching them, right? So, I mean, you know what they're doing. It makes sense. It's not our place. And the last thing I want us to do is to react to what the market did last year, because the year before it was killer and it's going to recover. It's already doing well. But I want to talk about tax title. And I was looking at the tax title budget, and I see that there's a budget amount of $12,000. I lost the line. $12,000.
last year, yeah.
How much of that was rolled over from last year? Do we know?
I think it was 7. I think it had built up and we rolled it forward, I believe, in the prior year. And then
And so
again last year.
And so now we're proposing. I'm sorry, so 7,000 last year, we had a budget of 5,000, now we have another budget of 5,000. We've spent $700, so we'd be pushing it up to 16,000. What's the long-term projection for tax title? Is there a time where I guess 5,000 is not that much.
No, so if I could answer, so I actually have this year I've begun working with the attorney to try. So we're doing really well with tax title. A lot of people were just responding positively to me reaching out in communication. We were seeing them with some reductions in the tax title account and payments being made. Unfortunately, I felt like we were kind of hitting that point where we needed people respond differently to attorneys' letters. People respond differently to a little more of an aggressive response. So I have actually begun working with the tax title attorney. I actually just submitted a bill schedule today to Gail for about $4,000. So that $4,000 will be, is going to come right out of this expense item come next week. And the goal is to really see a drastic reduction in our account. We did see a reduction over this past year. We were at around $120,000 in our tax title balance last year, and now we are down to 95. So we are seeing progress there. But unfortunately, it's going to cost us some money to get it down further where I would like it to be. We still have about 14 parcels in there. And, of course, well, I'm sure we'll see a few more enter at the end of this fiscal year, but I would like to see that reduced drastically. And I think I just now from this recent $4,000 cost, I think we'll see at least 2 to 3 more just come off before we even have to go further with it. So that's why I'm requesting, despite what seems like a lack of activity in there.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, did you have another question? or-
Yeah, no, I want to comment, George and Jim, you misunderstood my concern. I'm not here to try to figure out how to second guess the market. But we have almost $1 million with Bartholomew and Associates. And I frankly just would like to know how they've invested it. That's all. I'm just curious because they have a huge chunk of our money, and let's just pay attention to it, because if you pay attention to these people, then maybe you get better results. That's all.
Well, I was just reacting to you, Jim, because you made the comment that we should be looking at treasury bills, and you were making it
Well,
sound like you were
I'm
criticizing the way they're investing. So I just wanted to counterpoint it. That's all.
Well, no, the markets are shifting back and forth, in a crazy way. But I mean, I've always been bothered by an aggressive the aggressive portfolio, which is what was stated last year. And boy, this would be a pretty bad time to be in an aggressive portfolio. I just want to get a sense of what they're doing. That's all.
Susie,
I just feel like this conversation doesn't need to happen tonight, and people can take their concerns at a different meeting.
let's focus on, budget questions. All right, does anybody have any FinCom members have other questions for Ryan on any of these items? Okay,
Thank you.
thanks,
Ryan.
Ryan.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks,
Thank you
Ryan.
very much. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
One way of putting it.
All right, I'm gonna do a little shuffle on the agenda because Miriam I asked her to come at 7:45. We're already 15 minutes behind. So she's here to update us on, we allocated $2,500 for legal fees for the Concom, and those funds are exhausted and they have a follow-up request. So Miriam, can you just kind of walk us through both sort of kind of where things stand, like and what the needs of the committee are, and sort of how maybe you could also update us on kind of how those $2,500 were expended. Was it Lotto 32 related or other things?
Yes. So thank you. Thank you for putting this on the agenda on short notice. So walking back to the meeting in the beginning of December, the Conservation Commission wanted to retain an outside counsel because they had some legal questions regarding the Lot 032 permitting and ANRAD process. And as you know, this was a complicated process, and our town council recused herself, so we did not have access to legal advice. And I think, without getting into the reasons why we felt like we needed legal advice, suffice it to say, the commission came to this decision carefully and not impulsively. But the proposal had been that we thought our needs would be met with $2,500, which came out to about 8 hours of time, including 2 to 3 meetings, reviewing documents, communicating with the chair and the commission if need be, and then if need be, communicating with the select board's council if there were questions that needed to be resolved through that avenue. And the expenses were more than what we anticipated, partially because of matters that were outside of our control, including a request that came in December from the town for a change in one of the existing permits. That was a little unusual, was not something we typically get. It wasn't clear what we could do legally. It was not something that DEP could advise us on. We really needed to ask an attorney. So she needed to review that issue and that permit and gave us the advice we needed. We had hoped that she would be present at the last public hearing for the ANRAD, and that we would have enough time in our budget left over for her to attend a planning meeting with the select board to talk about future permitting for Lot 032. So we're at a stage right now where we've expended not quite $2,500. It's about $2,300. And so I'm coming back to the finance committee, I think, to ask what our options are. I think that what was a question in my mind when I left at the meeting in December was kind of what happens if we get to this place. I don't know that I asked that way. So now I'm asking that of the finance committee, if there are resources that the town could make available for us, so that we could at least complete the anticipated scope that we had laid out for ourselves. I think, you know, we're being careful and judicious about this. I think we would like to see ourselves having legal counsel on parity with the select board. I think, you know, it feels kind of imbalanced if we're in a position where we can't ask for legal advice, but about town projects, but the town does have access to legal counsel. So I think that there's just kind of a fairness kind of parity component to this ask. And that's kind of where we're at.
So is the ask a specific number? Or is this more like a process?
It's really both.
Okay.
Because right now we have a public hearing planned for March 9th. And we don't have a plan in place for a planning meeting with the select board. And we would really want our council to discuss that with the select board's council and set up a time frame for that, as well as come to this last ANRAD hearing. So we are unable to have her come for the last ANRAD hearing unless we have funds available to pay for her time.
Okay. Questions from the committee, Bob?
Yes, Miriam, Bob Groves, do you have any notion of what, we've been around this kind of thing many times on this committee where we've seen legal expenses kind of just continue to mount up. You know, Becky has brought these issues to us because the town has suffered these things for many reasons. But what do you anticipate when this will be wrapped up? Do you have any way of estimating that?
No, because I can't be entirely, these are conditions that are outside of my control or even the commission's control to some extent, because the town is the applicant here. But there are some outstanding questions that have to get resolved. And, you know, I hope you can appreciate that we're a volunteer board, and having access to legal counsel is really, really important for the work that we do. And not just for this particular matter, but in general, we do need to have access to counsel. It's indispensable. We're making legally binding decisions all the time, and we're not lawyers, nor are we judges. And yet that is the nature of the Conservation Commission, is that we're adjudicating legal decisions, and we do it at our peril and at the town's peril if we're not getting proper legal advice. And
I do understand that.
yeah.
I do understand that this case is different because the town is the applicant, and so therefore you can't use your normal resource, which is the town's council. Is that correct? Is that true?
Yes, she's recused herself in that. And I guess there's a related question that just came up. I was talking to Becky today, and Becky made a comment on the phone that there was the first I had heard of it, that it was under her impression that perhaps town council was recusing herself from anything involving Lake Wyola permitting. And no one has communicated that to the committee.
That's not what I meant to say, if that's what you heard, Miriam.
Oh, okay.
No, my confusion was about multiple roles for Emily Stockman. I wasn't making any reference to Donna.
Oh, okay. All right.
So that's what I was leading up to, was wondering what kind of money if we were going to consider a grant of more money or a transfer of more money into your account, what kind of money?
Well, I think if we, to be judicious about it, my thought had been that $1,000 would seem reasonable to me. And then we would have to reconsider, and hopefully we would be at a place where we don't have to come back. It's hard to be coming back and doing this in dribs and drabs, because we don't know, we aren't necessarily going to know how much time the council might need to review something or to give us an opinion. So I would hope that would be sufficient, assuming nothing complicated comes up. And I'm hoping that there isn't anything complicated at this point.
But just
But
to be clear,
I really don't know. I mean, there's some issues, there's some outstanding issues around future permitting that we just haven't resolved. We just don't know what that's going to look like, and we haven't even begun that conversation.
but and future permitting related to specifically to Lotto 32, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's what we're talking about is okay. All right. Any other questions for Miriam? Becky?
Miriam, I believe your town council is $320 an hour.
Yep.
So that's barely 3 full hours. Were you
Yeah.
saying you needed her for the NRAD hearing?
Yeah, I
And
think that probably $1,000 is not sufficient, because if the hearing lasts for an hour and a half and she needs to do a half an hour prep, that's 2 hours right there. And if we're going to have a future meeting with the select board and that meeting lasts for an hour and she needs to do an hour of prep, that's 2 hours. So,
So maybe asking for at least 4 hours from what you just outlined?
You could even make it rounded up to 1,500, and I think that would be safer.
Susie?
I'm going to return to my perspective that the CONSCOM has some money in their account for consultation. And I feel like if they are having to take it from there, they might be able to spend less. And that's my recommendation, to take it from the CONSCOM consultation fund, which I think is 7,000 right now.
5,000.
5
And none
thousand?
of it, and not, if, looking at the current expenditure report, it's 5,000 and there's been nothing expended so far this year.
George, I think you're looking at a different account.
I'm on the wrong page.
Yeah, I
Page
think
3 of the budget.
Yeah, because there's a wetlands protection line for 7,887. Miriam, which is that you
Uh,
have that one available, and then the other one is,
bylaw fee. So
Bylaw.
I can tell you what we have coming up that we were hoping to use those funds for. One is that we're planning on doing an overhaul of our bylaw regulations. And we may want to use a consultant to review the draft bylaw regulations before we promulgate any. That would come out of the bylaw fund. It can't be, the other fund can't be used for anything related to the bylaw. We also have been talking with the personnel board and with a couple of other conservation commissions about wanting to create a paid professional level conservation agent position. And our thought would be that we would hopefully be able to partially fund that position by increasing fees, by overhauling the bylaw regulations. But if we want to hire somebody, if we're successful in being able to create a position, we might want to use that $7,000 as kind of startup funds until we've accumulated fees, rather than waiting a year, we might want to hang on, use those funds as a way of beginning to pay for that position. So I think that has been tentatively what we've been thinking about, is that we might want to use those funds for paid professional staffing, which might decrease our need for legal guidance if we had a professional level wetland scientist on our staff.
Susie?
And my feeling is that this is here, this is now, we've done some of the support, and you could spend it out of the conservation fund and approach the future when you get there.
George?
I would say the same thing. I mean, $5,000, none of it's been spent. It doesn't sound like there's anything concrete. Sounds like there are some plans, but let's see how the year goes. And we can always come back and increase that line if necessary with some FinCom reserve. But there's a lot of unknowns. So I tend to agree with Susie on this.
Ooh. Could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, please, Mary.
So when this whole process came up and we wanted to hire an attorney, and then the select board hired a counsel as well, is there a cap on what the select board has available for their counsel?
Yeah, I mean, they have a budget, and then I think they're. So Rita mentioned at that meeting, the last meeting, that they were going to be, they were anticipating expending that budget.
And how much is that?
I think we're there. Does anybody have that?
The legal line?
Yeah, the legal line. I think it's 15,000. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, and a big portion of it has been spent.
Yeah. Right.
I get it for you. I got it right here. So legal for the year is $15,000. 9,800 has been spent through January 31st, I believe, is this report. January 26th. So there's still 9,000 left, but I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong line. Yeah, 5,000 left. But I think
it's actually even.
we made.
I think there's even less, because did Becky drop off for a second there?
She's down there somewhere.
Okay, yeah.
Dark. She's in dark.
I thought I had heard that they had essentially fully spent that.
It was
expense.
anticipated that they would. That's why we made the transfer for the select board.
I guess that wasn't the question I asked. I was wondering, and maybe you can't quantify it, but the expenses related to the Lotto 32 legal expenses, how much was being budgeted for the select board for that?
Becky, do you have an answer to that? I'm not sure. So was there a separate?
You did
Becky, you're muted.
sorry, I froze, so I was missing in action. If you could catch me up, the question is
What was the
about how
transfer?
much of what?
Well, how much did we transfer for the select board's legal costs? Remember, we did a FinCom transfer for that?
I don't think we did, George.
We
I thought,
we did not do it. We're requesting a transfer tonight. There was never a transfer prior
The
to
select board,
tonight.
Rita didn't ask us for money? I thought she had.
We did
Okay,
not.
my memory.
she
The
said that,
select board came to support the request from the Concom. And we've had high pressure on our regular budget. Planning board has been using it actively. And I've been communicating with them. They've got their potentially more bylaws that they want to propose. They have 2 open cases. And the select board to date has spent just under $5,000 on legal expenses to do with, I believe, with Lot 032. I think it's 4,600. And so we're out of funds in the town legal line, just as the Concom is, and both accounts were spent in full by the end of December. And we have not yet received January bills, but I don't think there've been any Lot 032 bills from, I don't know. I haven't been told about any from the town's participation there. But I'm just monitoring numbers. I'm coming forward with a request. Originally, we were thinking we needed 10, but with all the activity in with planning board, they calculated would need an additional 3,000 on top of the money already spent. We used Donna. We had her come to the special town meeting, and there was an extreme amount of activity trying to resolve the Kestrel Land Trust transaction. So I'm anticipating a very high January bill from Donna McNichol. And that has to be paid for out of the request we're making tonight as well.
Okay.
Which does, Concom was actively working on that too, but it's not, that's being handled by the town.
all right, Jim Walton.
I guess the way I interpret the back and forth in this discussion, to me, I'm sort of drawing a conclusion that we're looking to be requesting the support, an escalation in a legal back and forth here, which I don't think is a role of the finance committee. I guess I don't understand some of the background or fundamentals of this, but when I hear the question raised that, well, the select board is spending more money, so we need to spend more money. That to me that sort of scares me, that we're getting into an escalation here that I don't think I would support an escalation. And I think some of the comments that were earlier here, if there's some money within the conservation committee's budgeting funding that can support this, the $7,000 or $8,000 there, and they have a number of different ways they can spend that. If this is the most important thing to spend it on right now, maybe that's what we should be doing, is spending that conservation committee money on legal, if that is what's felt to be the most important thing.
All right, Jim Hemingway.
Yes, well, I disagree with that comment and the ones that would. We argued back and forth quite a bit in December on this issue, and we voted almost unanimously, as I recall, to support the Conservation Commission and award them $2,500. And I think we should do the same this time around. And $1,500 is a pretty small amount after sitting through what the school is spending and everything else. This is small potatoes. I think the Concom has been working very hard on this, and they deserve our support on this specific motion. Go ahead.
Bob?
Yeah, I want to sort of re-echo that. I think that we discussed this at length. The select board supported this idea. In principle, the Concom is in a bind legally because they need counsel, and they can't use the town's council, which they normally would do under normal circumstances. So they need our support for them to do their job. This is an extraordinary expense, not normal at all, perfect use of this function of our committee to provide them with support for an extraordinary and unpredicted expense. I think that it's just as important. We should note that the line that we devised for the legal expenses for this year is run dry because unanticipated legal costs and greater costs than what we expected have now been obtained. And so we're out of money there. We're going to increase the legal line for the town undoubtedly because they need it and we don't really have a choice. And similarly, the Concom doesn't have a choice. They have to do their job. In order to do their job properly, they need to have counsel. So it's just as important, same principle as it was then. So let's support this.
So can I ask Bob and Jim a question? Just like what
Could I possibly make a comment?
Like,
Okay, go ahead.
Is that okay? So
Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to the comment about funding an escalation. Because I really don't feel that that is what we're asking the finance committee to do, nor do I believe that is what is happening on our end. And I just want to be clear that the scope of what we wanted legal advice for hasn't changed. We're still confining what we want legal guidance for to, what I kind of laid out. However, we're kind of at the mercy of the applicant. If the applicant wants to do things differently, if they want to revise their permit, if they want to ask us to, they want to apply for something different, we have to be responding to that. And so just in December alone, the town revised its ANRAD and changed what area it was reviewing. And it came to us asking us to revise another permit. And those are both very complicated questions. I personally, in my experience on the commission, had not encountered those two situations before. And nor do I think anybody else on the commission felt equipped to respond without legal counsel. So it isn't that we were escalating things, and I'm not saying that the select board was. I think that there was legitimate needs on the part of the town to revise their applications, and they did so appropriately. And we responded appropriately after getting legal advice. And that's kind of what the best process is. Nobody's escalating things. We're not trying to be adversarial. We're just trying to do things correctly so that we don't create financial jeopardy for the town later with other kinds of complications. As you all are aware, there's been a lot of scrutiny on this particular piece of property, so we're being careful, as we should be. And
So Miriam, could you articulate what the negative consequence would be if our recommendation was to utilize this other fund to fund the costs of additional legal fees and then come
Sure.
back to us if it's something.
So we've got a pot of fund. We've got a little war chest, if you will, if you want to call it that, that we've been saving and not spending rashly because we wanted to save those funds for something that was really important for our commission. And if we expend it, we might not be able to hire professional staff. And yet that is something that we've identified as being a priority. Or B, we might need to revise our permits and raise our fees more than we would have anticipated in order to make up the difference. A good chunk of the money that is in that account right now was not accumulated from permitting people's septic systems or they're building a garage. They came from the solar ANRADs, which are a unusual application. We're not going to get more of those. They're probably a one and done. So that pot of funding might take many years to rebuild. So we want to be careful and thoughtful about that.
But couldn't you approach the FinCom with a separate request that for a kind of important special project for the committee when you were ready to kind of pursue that? Is that?
Well, we
that be-
probably would if we were, if we pursue this idea of developing a paid professional level position, we would probably be wanting to come to the FinCom and the select board about what the funding mechanism would need to be, because we weren't going to ever be able to fully fund it on fees. We were hoping to offset some of the impact for the town financially by utilizing fees to support that position. But
Okay.
if we increase the fees tomorrow, and let's say 6 months, maybe in the next 3 months, we develop this position and we are successful in hiring an employee. It's going to take a year or more to accumulate funds for that person's wages. And in the meantime, we would be spending down our war chest. So if we spend down our war chest now, then we would be coming to the FinCom or to town meeting, and perhaps we would be successful. Maybe we wouldn't be successful in being able to fund that position. I think having money in hand and being able to say, listen, right out of the gate, we've got a chunk of money to kind of be seed money for this position, so to speak. I think makes a compelling argument for creating this position. So we might be losing that. I don't know.
Okay. George?
Well, I think, the $5,000 is sitting there, and we really don't know what those actual costs will be for those possible items. Number one, I want to say is, yes, I want you to get legal advice. I think you're 100% right. You need to do that. And so this money is going to need to be spent if you're going to have to spend these 3 or 4 hours. There's no question. But I do think, if you came back in May and your $5,000 is down low, and now you've got an estimate of what it's going to cost you to do the bylaw, I can't imagine that this committee wouldn't be supportive. And the year's looking pretty good as far as the amount of money that's available in the FinCom reserve. So if we don't have a major issue strike the town in the next 3 months, those funds would be there. So I think that's probably because there's been so much uncertainty on this, and there could be even more expenses again, and you could be coming back to us again, even for this. So I think, let's use the $5,000, and then let's look at where we are as you're getting to the end of the year. This is just the way I'm looking at it, and this is why I'm not going to support at this point, transferring funds to legal. I think let's use this. $5,000 is a lot. I don't know what it's going to cost to do a bylaw. I know this item that you're facing right now has your highest legal annual billing rate that you'll probably see. So I'm optimistic that even if we do proceed with the bylaws that, I know, I don't know. And that's the thing. We just don't know really what it'll be. So, I would support that if you came to us in 2 months and said, here, I got a plan. We're going to be able to execute it this year. Sure, I would definitely be willing to listen to that. But for now, I think, let's deal with the highest priority item. Funds are there in your budget, and then we can, we'll back you. We have been backing you. I don't want to commit to anything. I can't commit to anything, but if you bring a comprehensive, a good plan, like this is perfectly articulated what you need now. I'm sure that's what you would do when you proceeded in the future. So I would be supportive myself.
Okay. So guys, I think we have to wrap up. I know, Bob, you've got a comment. So can we make that the last comment on this topic? And then, if there's an action to take, what will, somebody's going to need to propose a motion. But, Bob?
You're on mute, Bob.
You're mute.
I just want to reiterate very briefly that the select board and this committee supported this when the CONCON came to us. And so I think we should support it again. I think it's an extraordinary circumstance, and they shouldn't be forced to dip into their little savings accounts. So I make a motion that we approve a request for $1,500 for their additional legal requirements.
Second.
Okay. I don't think there's any other discussion needed. So let's vote.
Carbonitis, no.
Archer, aye.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, no.
Mosier, no.
Jim's out of the office.
What happened to Jim? What happened to Jim?
He said
Oh,
he's no longer there. Oh, here he comes.
Hey, Jim, it's good timing.
I'm sorry.
There's a motion on the floor that's been seconded and we started voting on it to transfer $1,500 FinCom reserves to the Concom for this additional legal expense.
Okay, you've already gone through the vote?
Yeah, you're the last, you're
Well,
the last one.
I didn't hear the motion, but I think AJ, based on what you said, I would say nay.
Okay.
No.
All right, so I think the motion failed 3-4, is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Miriam, I think I'd like to say, I think there's support here for you taking the action that you need to take in terms of getting legal advice. I would come back to us if and when there's a project that is going to require more of those consultant funds than that you're going to be spending down to pay for this attorney. So I hope you don't hear any of this discussion as a discourage.
No, that's
discouraging you
fine.
yeah.
Fine.
All right.
Okay,
cool.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Good night.
Okay. All right, guys, looking at the clock, it's 8:30. We've got plenty to do still, so I'm hoping everybody can kind of hang in there. I think the main items that we have to get to tonight are some other FinCom transfer requests. I think that we should tackle that next because I think that's urgent. We can, I think, maybe do the assessor budget at our next meeting. But Becky, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but we've got 2 FinCom transfer requests to discuss. One is from the collector, and then one is this issue of the
Legal.
town's legal line. Can you share with us what the requests are?
Okay, the first request is in relationship to the collectors, the tax collectors change in software. So I guess this happens in this industry from what I've been told is the data extraction that is required to occur to send the data to VADAR is being they are gonna not release it until we pay $5,850. And then they will release the data to VADAR so that Ellen can again keep moving on the transfer to the transition from Point software to VADAR software. And I sent a copy of the invoice. Can you bring
Yeah,
that
I'm
up?
actually good. I'm trying to pull it up right now. Let's see.
I'm sorry, I have a physical copy I can show you.
Here. Okay, here it is. No, sorry, that's the wrong one. Let's see.
And Becky, we know they have legal standing to do that.
I'm sorry?
We know that they have legal standing to do that. In other words, we don't own the data.
Correct. In their original contracts, they secure possession of the data.
Does blackmail fit into this or
Extortion?
maybe kidnapping?
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
Well, we have a contract with this company, then we're breaking the contract. That's the penalty right there. If we
Really?
had gone through the contract, we would.
Well, they are also breaking the contract by no longer being able to provide the services they provided and they're actually selling out to another vendor.
They're not supporting the old
Change
system.
the software. I'm sorry.
They're not supporting the old system anymore.
Correct.
No, they're not a provider of this anymore. Yeah.
Oh, so they've got us. Wonder if we have any options here other than just paying up.
No, let's pay up and get done with
Get
it.
some legal counsel.
Yeah, that's
Now,
right.
let's start.
All right.
Make
Well-
that 26,000 I need. for the- Oh my God.
But I thought, Becky, please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I thought when Ellen presented this to one board or the other, either the FinCom or the capital planning, that there was, this number was part of it, was part of getting out of the contract, and it was part of the cost of purchasing the new system. Isn't that true?
She mentioned the cost, but it's also, this is not capital. I mean, it's weird. And it's an expense that needs to, as you can see, the date of this is January 4th. So this needs to be done before anything else can happen. And originally, we didn't think anything was going to move forward on the Vadar until until annual town meeting. But anyway, so this is, without doing this, they can't, Vadar, who is waiting in the wings to get moving, can't do anything until Point receives this funding and then releases the data.
I understand, but I think this number was part
Yeah,
of.
she did bring it up.
So then this number should come out of somewhere else if we provide it tonight.
No, because we broke it into pieces and we funded the capital pieces earlier, and then this bill is getting funded now.
Right, so in other words, the capital request that was funded at special town meeting does not include this expense here, right? I mean, that's,
But you're gonna save, by the time we hit year 5, the $5,000 a year savings should pay for this too. It'll pay for the 20,000 we already spent in the first 4 years, and hopefully in the 5th year, it should cover this piece.
all right, Susie,
I make a motion that we transfer $5,850 from the FinCom reserve fund to the collector to pay this ransom note. Oh, I won't call it that.
Ransom is correct.
That's my motion.
I'll second that motion.
I think hostage would be more, well, I guess ransom too.
I seconded the motion. Is there any other discussion? I know I
Yeah.
see George and Jim have their hands up.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, am I next?
Yeah, go ahead, George, and then Jim.
I just want to ask a real quick, simple question to Becky. I know the answer already, but I'm going to ask it anyway, so we make sure it's covered. There's no data mining capabilities in the software that we currently have with Point where we could extract this data ourselves. You can confirm that, right? Is she here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out who might have those capabilities.
Well, it'd have to be Ellen.
Oh, God, no.
Well, does she have, accounting software applications typically have report writing tools, and, data mining is something a lot of people in finance do. And so I just was curious.
Yeah.
That option has to be looked at before I personally make this decision.
Could I propose?
To everyone, she has asked and inquired at Vadar if they could somehow, if there was any way that they could help her extract the software, but it's all in the possession, Point's possession, and these are their terms for doing business. And
Okay.
they will extract the data and deliver it, but they will not allow Vadar or another firm to do that.
I apologize for holding us up, but I just.
Oh, that's okay. It's a good point.
I mean, maybe we could, maybe we could have a vote on this tonight if it's approved. If you, Becky, could perhaps just send a note out to Ryan and others asking if there's any capacity either internally within the town or a consultant that perhaps we have a relationship with that could utilize reports to do that work before we actually pay this bill. That would be.
And you can imagine Ellen's nervousness about this whole process.
Yeah.
And the thought that an amateur would touch her data. She'll just, I can't imagine how she would feel.
It's
All right.
critical data. There's no question about it.
Jim Hemingway?
Yeah, has Donna McNichol, you taken a look at this by any chance? It seems to me we might have Susie referred, we're sort of getting back, blackmailed about this. But I was just wondering if Donna has taken a look at it, maybe she can make a threatening phone call.
I have not reached out to her, as you are aware from the prior conversations. I have
Yeah.
no money left, and my only phone call to Donna in the last 10 days has been to say we're out of money. Please, and please stop making appointments with the planning board guys until we resolve this situation.
Bob, did you have a?
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think in my guesstimate, this company has this data, somehow
Marked up.
mixed up, so you can't read it, you can't manage it yourself. And so it's probably, they've got us over a barrel, and it's probably a legal requirement under their contract that if we leave the contract, that we have to pay to have the data transferred to a new system. That's my guess. But don't we have a hacker down at the elementary school that can?
Sixth grader. I think it'd be risky if, I don't want to risk compromising the data or thinking we have it all when we don't. So I'm going to go back to just
Okay.
spending money.
All right, so we've got a motion.
right.
It's been seconded, so I think it's time to vote. George?
Arvanitis, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Groves,
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Walton, I.
Okay. All right, and then Becky, in terms of funding the legal line, is there a specific ask or request?
I think I put out to you, it was $10,000. And then I did get through to Jeff Lacy and spoke with Michael DeCara and got more clear estimate that they're needing at least potentially. Well, Jeff was happy. He felt with $3,000, they could take care of the 2 open cases. And then after that, I spoke with Michael DeCara, who brought up a number of issues that they're going to be deciding in the next meeting or so, whether bylaw initiatives that they hope to take to annual town meeting. And those always require a lot of legal on top of the original $3,000. So I was thinking, I had thought 10,000, but I think if we ask for 13,000, we have a more realistic chance of getting through the year.
Wow. And what's FinCom reserve balance at right now?
It's at about 45. No,
No, it's got to be more than that.
It's got to be, yeah.
it's 18. We did 18 plus the 2020. So we've spent about 25 of the 70.
Including the 5850?
No.
Becky, at some point, not necessarily
So
tonight.
we are at about, you are already at about 40 before a legal transfer. Because of the generator was at 18.5.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, the generator was 18.5. Miriam was 2,500.
15.
The newest one, the original one was 25.
Yeah, right.
But the 15 didn't just go through.
Yeah.
So we're about
We're about
40,
40.
45. There was another transfer, I can't remember what it was,
Yeah, I was
early in the year.
We should keep a running tally of it.
I do have it normally. I'm sorry, I don't have it tonight, George.
No, that's okay, Becky. I was just gonna ask, I think for the committee, and I hate to ask you to do more work. I know every time I open my mouth, I make Becky, but every time, if you had a little spreadsheet where you just 75,000, this out of it, here's the balance, update it every time we do a transfer and just send it to us, just so, we all know where we stand without.
Yeah, and it's usually right in the document, but
And I'd be happy to do that in the future. I just, at this point, don't know what was what, so I can't. But anyways, that's just, that's a sidebar, really.
Okay, so we started at 72.5, not 75.
Really? I think of the
Yeah.
budget we approved was 75.
I mean, I'm looking at.
That's what I thought too, but no, I,
The three
Might be the
items that
data
we
conversion,
listed,
or the first item might have been taken out of there.
the generator, 18,000?
no, it would have showed up, George.
Yeah. Well, I know that what we approved at town meeting last year was 75,000.
I think we reduced it this year going into the budget.
Oh, okay. Well. Wow. So we're really cutting it thin, though. I mean, thinner than most years.
I mean, do we have any choice here? I mean, seeing.
We had, the select board originally, they went through the process and took a vote to take it out of ARPA, but I looked into it on Gail Weiss's concern, and you can't backfill a budget with ARPA funds. So that avenue is not available.
Sense. The only other option would be special town meeting for free cash.
So if we're cutting it close, if we have a good year in other areas, we'll be fine. But
By the way, the generator authorization was 19,700.
that's right, because there was the extra 1,200.
For the
The
gas.
total we've taken is 27.7 as far as the three items. The generator, what we just voted for Ellen, and the legal line that we transferred that we made, 27.7. So deduct that from whatever the starting point was. Was it 72? Was it 75?
72,500.
72.5.
72.5, 27.7. Okay,
44,800.
And you doubted me when I said 45,000, George.
I didn't doubt you. I never said you were wrong. I didn't know.
well, we've got to vote the legal line, then we don't really have a choice in the matter, right? So let's.
Yeah, I'm not seeing an alternative. I'm gonna make a motion to.
Take sales.
I'm gonna make a motion to transfer $13,000 FinCom reserves to the legal line.
Second,
All right, any other comments? All right, George, kick us off.
Arvanitis side.
Grove's eye?
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye?
Mosier, aye.
Walton, I.
And as a reminder, I think we did discuss the generator could be taken from free cash and then the money moved back into the finance reserve.
That's a good point.
That's
And
good.
the town meeting, if we start to, if things are bad.
Great.
And just one thing, I'm on the website at the annual town meeting documents, and the budget that was approved had $75,000.
Oh, okay.
And we just gained 2,500.
Yep,
Oh,
so
good.
it's 2,500 higher. So, yeah, I don't know
That's not
why
what
the
the budget,
report
that's
says.
not what our budget says. Our budget line says 72,500.
I know,
think
but
there
I'm
was
telling you what's
another
on
spending.
what's on our website as
Yeah.
having
No,
been
but she
approved.
can, if that is not correct, I can take it to Gail and she can make the correction.
Yeah, see what's going on.
Yeah,
I think
'cause
that's the
their Bible
point. That's
is
why
our
I
budget.
raise it.
Jim Hemingway?
Becky, do we have, has anything set up to sell private auction for the old generator? There are people who would like to pay up for that, and that would bring a little bit of money back into our reserve fund if possible. I was just wondering if that was something that that was suggested, as I recall.
There were a number of concerns about going in that direction, and the going rate for it was a couple of $100. And there was a very large concern about it's being a liability to other people. So it can be sold as
What?
surplus equipment, and that it could go through that process. We can look
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah, because I can think of a couple of people. I know that Lenny was interested in possibly purchasing it, and I can think of one or two others. So if
Jim, I'm going to remind you to take your ethics exam, because I did yesterday, and that particular question was on there, and the answer to the fire chief buying his surplus generator was a big no.
all right, okay, well.
I had that conversation with Lenny as well.
All right,
There's a
well,
lot
well,
of traps
well,
in
there-
those rules.
There are others who are not related to the fire department who would be interested. So, I mean, that's a little bit, it's not much, but it does, it would put a little bit money, but a little bit of money back into the pot.
So just looking at our agenda for tonight, so I think we've got to make some decisions here. One, I think we're going to do the assessor budget at our next meeting, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And we've got 4 town meeting, that's this
Saturday.
Saturday, right? Who's coming? I'll be there. Anybody else?
Yeah,
I'll be there, like it or not.
So I don't think we need to discuss it tonight. I mean, it looks like our budget is increasing by $4,731. It's a 0.31% increase. It's not impacted by the guardrails. They're going to fund the guardrails with other budget cuts that they'll probably explain at Saturday's meeting. So I don't think there's, unless anybody has any questions or comments, I don't think there's any planning that we need to do for that. Jim?
AJ, are we going to have another one of those preliminary meetings at 8:30 before the meeting starts?
I'm just not sure I'm not sure it's needed. I
agree. I just wondered because we've always done so in the past. That's all.
I mean, I think
Yeah.
because the guardrails issue, which was kind of I think the only issue that would have required us to kind of get a consensus view, since that's not a factor for Shutesbury, at least, doesn't seem to me like it's necessary.
Okay.
What do you think?
And I don't think the select board is feeling, or the school committee is feeling any urgency to strategize with us. That was all about the long haul of getting to statutory.
Okay. All right. We've got a comment from Mary Lou. We do sort of take public comments sort of during the discussions of various agenda items, but since it was so crazy today, that's why I had you hold off. So do you want to share your question or comment now?
Yes, if I could. Okay, so I'm Mary Lou Conca, and I didn't know that the school committee was talking with the finance committee. I thought you all were 2 separate meetings, and I kept trying to come in and see finance come, and then I thought I was going into the school committee, but that was my mistake. Earlier, I was hoping to talk to you both. I'll just say quickly, I'm an educator. I've worked in 11 different schools, and Shutesbury is one among the best that people come and they move here just so their children can go to that school. Sorry that the school committee didn't, I didn't get a chance to tell them. Okay. So you all we're talking about the budget. Where does the public find it? That's one question. My second question is, in that budget, are you all discussing, are you still talking about the roof? And I discovered something is sitting in a meeting that asbestos was found in the elementary school roof in whoever the people were up there in the attic looking at the roof, that asbestos was found. And yay, maybe they said it's contained, but to me, it's worrisome. It's a concern. So the question, I'm sorry, AJ, back to you, would be in this, what the school committee presented to you, was there something, a line, maybe that's what you call it on your on
So-
their request, yeah.
Yeah, I
for-
get the
for
question. So the
structure.
school roof is a capital project. It's not part of the operating budget for the
Okay.
school, which is what we were discussing tonight. That said, I mean, the school roof is being worked on. There's an engineering study that is taking place. I think we're waiting for the report. I think that's where we is there any other more recent update on that? I think we're waiting for the report on the Becky.
The report was received this week or last Friday. It might have been, it came in Thursday or Friday. I just wanted to respond because asbestos, the word asbestos makes us all very, very nervous. It was very clearly determined that no remediation has been recommended because the asbestos that was found was in tar paper, and the tar paper itself is what they call friable. And so you can't remove the asbestos from it without, it would have to, you'd have to burn it or destroy it and release it into the air, which you wouldn't want to do. And where it's located, if you go up into the attic, to access it, you have to go into the attic and you have to cut into the original roof to find it. It's totally contained, and it's not of the nature like asbestos and insulation that becomes airborne. So there's no concern, and all reports that have come back to me are that this is not a concern for the school, and that it will continue to lay dormant. There's no reason, unless you were to remove the roof and remodel, that if that were to happen, you'd have to, I don't even know if there would be remediation involved at that point because of the nature of it being friable, which is a different category that doesn't call for the remediation of the airborne type.
Thanks, Becky. Okay, so I think before we adjourn, I think we've got our next meeting on February 21st. Capital planning was on the calendar for that meeting. And I think we'll add the assessor's budget as well. Bob, do you think we're going to be actually ready to go on?
Your guess is as good as mine. I think our meeting is the 16th at 5:30. That was my latest effort to spare my memory. But what do you think, Becky, the capital planning?
You're gonna love it. Ellen told me it's on the 15th.
Okay, well, it might be.
But I can't do the 15th, so I'd be really happy to make it one of the other two dates.
Okay, there was an issue with some other members, but so the 16th or the 15th, the 16th would work for me. But I don't know if we'll be able to present anything after that meeting.
I think it's really going to depend on Tim. I mean, I think we'll be ready with the school's request, but it's the highway is I think.
I know that Steve confirmed today that Tim has a printout of a state contract with a very good price for what is it he's asking for? The backhoe? Yeah, the backhoe, which is better than any pricing that Steve found in another couple of places. So
I think for now, let's just assume that we will be discussing capital planning requests and the assessor on the February.
Another
20th.
question on the assessor, is that document in your Google page?
No,
Because I didn't find
no,
it.
I just sent it out tonight. It turns out I'm the current person in charge of the assessor's budget because we have no assessor. And
Okay. So it's just important that we get these ahead of time, because otherwise I can't really evaluate the thing,
well, there was no,
I know you're busy,
absolutely
Becky.
no change from last year. And this budget will probably change before we get to annual town meeting. Because the next step, we have just fully staffed the Board of Assessors as of as of the time George was appointed as our third assessor. We now have a full board of 3, having lost 2 assessors. And so now we're gonna dig in and try to, now that we're through the reval and all the work that we had to bring consultants in and are trying to get more stable in a day-to-day running of the assessors department. We're hoping with the extra support from George and April to tackle the problems of how to move forward and evaluate different consultants and continue to get more advertising out, hoping to find an individual that would be willing to work part-time for Shutesbury.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Are there any other kind of critical updates to share, Susie?
Annual town meeting date has been set for May 20th, so that helps figure out our calendar a little bit. And if we need to, we could always, things get jammed up, we will have extra dates for meetings, but I just wanted to put in the 20th is our, and we could work back from there to think about timing.
So that's outdoors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just along that line, is the state extended the COVID or the virtual meeting rules? I thought they were going to run out as of the
Oh,
end
right,
of March.
March. Mhm.
And has that been
I
extended?
thought it was April.
Well, either way, are they extending it or are we going to have to start meeting in person come?
Oh, God, no.
Could happen.
Yeah, at this point, as far as we know, it's going to happen because it doesn't sound like we've heard anything is happening. that's
But we
gonna
didn't
change it.
hear to the day before, or the day after, the last 2 times.
And Charlie
Yeah,
Bates
they
is
knew
gone.
the date the first time.
And Aaron did say that they haven't even started. Aaron Saunders did say today they haven't even started anything because they're still putting committees together. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
May 20th, okay.
Okay,
Right. Any other important updates, Bob?
make a motion to adjourn?
Second,
George, want to kick us off?
Aaron, I'd say.
What's your eye?
Love's eye?
Hemingway, aye.
Cast you eye.
Mosier, eye.
Walton, I.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks for hanging in there.
Saturday.
See you Saturday.
Good
Saturday.
luck.
Yeah.
Night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night, Mary Lou.